Speaker, sir, even before Budget 2025 was announced, many Singaporeans had expected that the government would be generous in giving handouts to Singaporeans because this year is an election year. Indeed, about $3.8 billion of special transfers will be distributed this year, compared to about $3 billion in both 2023 and 2024. In recent years, government handouts have become regular. It has become a national pastime of sorts to monitor the timetable of handouts each month, which is also publicized in the media and in the HDB lift lobbies. Can this really be healthy for our society? Comments are already circulating on the social media that the new 5 Cs of today are cash, CDC vouchers, climate vouchers, CPF top-ups, and charge cards. I'm sure that the first generation PAP leaders would never have allowed this to happen. While the PAP government's vouchers may help many Singaporeans deal with rising costs in the short term, they are not enough to help Singaporeans in the long term or solve Singapore's structural economic issues. PSP supports some short-term financial assistance in the budget to help deal with a high and rising cost of living. However, over the past 4 budget debates, we have also argued that instead of giving out short-term ad hoc handouts, we should have long-term permanent schemes to strengthen the social support for Singaporeans. The schemes proposed by PSP over the years, including a minimum living wage, affordable home scheme, national healthcare scheme with Medishield and CareShield premiums paid by the government, and caregivers allowance, will create financial security for Singaporeans and empower them with the resources to pursue their career aspirations, form families, and build a better life. On the other hand, is the SG60 voucher, which will benefit the billionaire living in a good-class bungalow and a one-room rental flat resident equally. Truly a good and fair use of our fiscal resources. It is the PAP's patchwork of scheme of handouts and vouchers that will breed dependency among Singaporeans and not PSP's proposals. PSP recognizes that it is unrealistic to expect living costs never to increase. But we maintain that the PAP's current budget approach and policies around taxes, reserves, and property prices are the main driver of the high cost of living in Singapore. Long before the Ukraine war and supply chain disruptions, Singaporeans have found it difficult to cope with the rising cost of living. This is a persistent structural problem caused by the PAP government. The government has collected a lot more revenue from GST, COE, and land sales over the past few years. This will eventually increase the cost of living for Singaporeans. The government has collected about $8 billion more revenue each year than its original estimates in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Will it do it again for 2025? The PAP government has always claimed that there is tight fiscal headroom. But if year after year, surpluses are always bigger than what is estimated, then it really calls into question why the government decided to inflict so much pain on Singaporeans by raising GST in 2023 and 2024 amid high global inflation. When I questioned PM Lawrence Wong on budget marksmanship at the debate last year, he said before COVID-19, our fiscal marksmanship was not too bad. and our forecast accuracy was not as good now because of COVID-19. Does the PM expect our budget marksmanship to be better this year, or will we end up having a larger surplus than we anticipated again? Budget marksmanship is important so that Parliament and Singaporeans have a clear view of the fiscal resources available to us. During the debate on the public finances motion last year, I explained that the government transfers a large part of the a large part of the surplus budget resources arising from the NIRC each year to many endowment and trust funds that are intended for future spending over the long term. This has camouflaged our huge structural surplus budget position. The same thing has happened this year, with about $20 billion parked away. It is also questionable whether so much of today's resources should be used for certain projects. For example, the government has parked another $5 billion in the Changi Airport Development Fund, even though over the years we have already put $6 billion there. We believe such a large infrastructure project should be funded by the Significant Investment Government Loan Framework, or SINGA, so that we can evaluate the commercial viability of such projects better. Our country's fiscal position is extremely strong, much stronger than what the PAP government would like to portray. Yesterday, Ms. Fumi Ha claimed that Singapore could face fiscal vulnerabilities like Hong Kong if we use land sales to fund our expenditure, like what PSP had advocated. PSP has only proposed that if a piece of land is sold on a 99-year lease, the proceeds should be recognized as revenue spread over 99 years. It is unlikely to create the fiscal vulnerabilities Ms. Fu suggested. I will remind Ms. Fu that last year, even SM Lee said our proposition was not unthinkable. Ms. Tin Pei Ling suggested yesterday that we should put back into the reserves what was taken out during COVID-19. She may not realize, but the $40 billion that was taken out has already been more than recovered, with the official foreign reserves increasing more than $200 billion since 2020 through the issuance of reserves management government securities. The government's financial position is strong, but ordinary Singaporeans' financial position is weak. An OCBC survey in November 23 found that fewer Singaporeans are able to comfortably spend on things beyond the basics. In March 2020, the government tabled the resilience budget, which was aptly named, because there's a need to make Singaporeans more resilient. After all the CDC vouchers and short-term schemes from the budgets over the last 5 years, have Singaporeans become more financially resilient? Judging from the conversations that PSP has had with many Singaporeans, the answer is no. That is why PSP believes there is an urgent need to reimagine our budget approach and public policies. Our objective is to empower Singaporeans so that they can be financially resilient without relying on ad hoc handouts. How can we do this? We need to better utilize the net investment return, or NIRC, and our budget resources to benefit Singaporeans so that they can become truly resilient. The NIRC amounts to about $27 billion in 2025. However, as I've explained before, budget resources amounting to about 80% of the NIRC is not spent in the same year, but parked in endowment and trust funds. There are more and more of such funds, and there needs to be more scrutiny over the use of these funds, as many will not directly benefit Singaporeans in the short term. Instead of parking funds in endowment funds and spending on special transfers that do not create long-term financial security for Singaporeans, we can fund PSP's 4 main policy proposals. Firstly, we have proposed the removal of land cost from public housing under the Affordable Home Scheme, or AHS, and the construction of quality rental flats for young Singaporeans under the Millennium Apartment Scheme. We can implement AHS without reducing the reserves, unlike what Minister Indrani has repeatedly claimed, but will empower Singaporeans in the following ways. Singaporeans of all generations will enjoy affordable public housing. As AHS flats cost less, Singaporeans will not have to deplete their CPF balances to pay off HDB mortgages. They will have adequate CPF savings for retirement without having to downgrade to smaller flats in retirement. Yesterday, Mr. Henry Kwek suggested that our schemes will put downward pressure on resale values. This will not happen because Singaporeans who sell their AHS flats will have to repay the land cost with accrued interest to the government. This will maintain stability in the resale market and allow Singaporeans to continue upgrading to private properties if they choose to do so. Mr. Kwek pointed out that many of his residents see their HDB flat as a key pillar of their retirement planning. I would like to point out that it is the PAP's inaction on lease decay that threatens resale values and some Singaporeans' retirement planning. PSP's AHS will empower Singaporeans and free them from such concerns. Our second proposal is to effectively create a national healthcare scheme by having the government pay the MediShield and CareShield premiums for all Singaporeans. Again, the national healthcare scheme will empower Singaporeans in the following ways. All Singaporeans will be able to enjoy a basic level of benefits when they need hospital treatment or certain outpatient treatments, free of charge, paid for by the state, without having to worry about the rising insurance premiums in the future. Singaporeans will have more Medisave balances to pay for other healthcare costs not covered by MediShield Life, freeing up their cash for other purposes. Our third proposal is to introduce a gross minimum living wage of $2,250 a month. We also support progressive wage increment up to the median wage of $4,500. These policies will empower lower-income Singaporeans with the financial resources to attain a minimum standard of living in a high cost of living environment more quickly than the government's progressive wage model. Singaporean workers will also enjoy further wage increments when they improve their skills. Our fourth proposal is the PSP Family Plan, which will reimagine our policies to support families. During the Population White Paper debate in 2013, SM Teo Chee Hean said, and I quote, "I hope our birth rate can increase to at least 1.4 or 1.5, which was our birth rate not so long ago, around the late 1990s and the early 2000s, unquote. We are not sure if SM Teo still has these hopes, but PSP certainly does. That is why our PSP family plan is a whole-of-society approach to better support family formation. Our two most important proposals are the enhanced job sharing scheme, and the caregiving allowance scheme. These proposals will benefit all parents, including single parents. The enhanced job sharing scheme will empower parents to opt for flexi-time work, will allow them to remain in the workforce while spending more time to care for the child. At the same time, employers will benefit from retaining their workers with children and employing more workers with government subsidies. The caregiving allowance scheme will pay one parent or grandparent an allowance of $1,250 per month if they are full-time caregivers of children below age 7. This will empower families to explore different childcare arrangements and strengthen extended family bonds. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, Singaporeans have worked hard to build Singapore from third world to first in the last 60 years. However, more problems have emerged in the lives and livelihoods of many Singaporeans in the last 20 years. We do not want a first world Singapore where the next generation has to live in smaller and smaller flats that are also more and more expensive relative to income. We do not want a first world Singapore where public transport only seems to be more and more crowded, expensive, and unreliable. We do not want a first world Singapore where a small group of elites and foreign billionaires coming here to pay lower taxes get to enjoy large good-class bungalows, play golf at country clubs, and drive around on congestion-free roads in their Bentleys and Lamborghinis, while the elderly and destitute sell tissue paper at hawker centers. We want a Singapore where Singaporeans are no longer financially stressed, can form families when they are ready, are free to pursue their careers and starting businesses, are free from worries about healthcare and retirement costs, and enjoy a fulfilling retirement life, looking after their grandchildren as a choice. This is the first world we should aspire to create, this SG60. This is the first world Singapore that PSP will fight for. We urge Singaporeans to think beyond the short term and dream bigger than the PAP government. Notwithstanding our reservations, PSP will still support Budget 2025 to provide Singaporeans with the short-term assistance that they need until the long-term schemes are in place. Thank you. For country, for people.